Go for it. I like how everyone. Bam.
Bruh. You're amazing.
Yo, no, dude. Do you know I've been on these floors?
No, I got it.
Oh, you got it?
He got it.
Oh shit.
He got it, dude.
All right.
What a man. Talk. Jace, you hear us up there?
Hey, sexy mama, let me whisper in your ear. We cannot sing any more of that song. We risk getting copyright strikes.
Also, that's going to be on YouTube forever now, so.
Nah, we're good. Let me see if I can pull it up.
He got us. Alright.
Hey, CSG, John here. What about files? Have you ever noticed how files are created and destroyed?
Alright,
But did you know that files cannot actually be destroyed? So for the rest of the talk, you seem to be right here.
So we're going to be talking about file systems today. It's going to be a good talk. We're going to talk about files and.
You can't hear it, but the PAs are right up below, it can hear you.
We didn't verify these people signed in.
We haven't been checking.
No.
Okay. If you guys haven't already, make sure you sign in. If you're grabbing pizza, please make sure you sign in. The only way we're actually able to get pizza is because you guys sign in. If you're an Oflo, you need to sign in. Make sure they say that. If you guys are just not rolling in, if you can't find a seat, you have overflow. I think room numbers over there. If they have pizza up there, you can go and chill. I don't know what they're doing. Yeah, we got places like that. They actually gave us 2 Hawaiians this time. They gave us 2 Hawaiian pizzas this time. Yeah, no, I don't only get 1. The only reason I get Hawaiian is usually 1. Okay, so
John.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
All right, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. Once again, I want to remind you guys to please sign in if you haven't done so. We're going to start off with some announcements by
We do a head
John.
count. We do a head count during every meeting. We know some of you guys don't even sign in, and nothing makes me angrier, actually.
Please appease John. He's very scary.
At some point, I'm just going to start like snooping on all of you guys and find out who exactly is not doing it, and what are we going to do there? It's not going to be good for anyone.
Your sign-in helps us, and we help you by getting better rooms, more pizza, just generally better things for the group. So please, 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 sign in.
Speaking of which, if you want to be angry at anyone right now about not having room space, be angry at ECS West. We were about to get a pretty friggin' awesome room, and then the last minute they cock-blocked us and said that they don't want us there. That's actually what they said. Yeah, they said we don't want you guys. You're gross, and you'll make our rooms dirty. So ECS West faculty said no.
And whether or not that's true, it still happened.
I mean, legally, I cannot tell you to do that.
We are not telling you to protest.
As a representative of the school, if you're going to go protest and legally have to say don't do that, but do as you will, please do not wear any sort of CSG paraphernalia. Be a student and be advocating for student rights. Yeah.
Questions thing. What is it?
Questions thing?
Yeah.
Oh, how do you open up questions? Well, are you presenting on... Okay, which one are we doing? This one?
Yeah.
You want to present with presenter view.
Awesome.
And you don't have a second screen, so this is going to be a little bit tougher. But what you'll do is you'll have speaker notes, or I'm sorry, you'll do audience tools, and just tab open to this every now and then. All right? So just check it. Oops, my bad. Wait. Yeah, this is you. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I popped
Oh,
over.
no.
Nice.
All right, let's do that.
If you guys have questions, you can go ahead and ask them there. We're going to be utilizing this tool pretty heavily now that we have some people who are going to be watching satellite. Yeah, so we have a couple of upcoming events. We have the ACM Maker Fair. That's on September 20th at 12 o'clock in Synergy Park North Makerspace. That's going to be really cool if you guys want to learn more about different various groups on campus, and if you're ever so inclined to do makery things, that's a great event for you to go to. We have Fire Talk signups. If you've ever been interested in giving a short little talk about something you're doing, 5 minutes or so, this is a great way to do it. It's a great resume booster. We can record it for you if you want. It looks great on LinkedIn profiles. I know for a fact that recruiters, they just love it when they see tangibles like a video on your LinkedIn profile. And then we also have CSG officer applications. If you think Fire Talks is not enough and you want to do this full time and you want to deal with CC's Pizza and telling people to sign in to the attendance sheets, then apply to be an officer. Please, we're looking for people.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, John. Give a big hand for John, everybody. Thank you. Love that man. All right, so today we're going to talk about a little bit of files and file system forensics. So occasionally I'm going to be tabbing over here to get questions from both you guys and the guys upstairs. So that's going to happen because I don't have another screen here. So we're going to have to deal with that. But the first thing about forensics is that in general, when you're doing forensics on any system, the process of documenting what you do is paramount because most likely when you're doing forensics professionally, it is in a setting where you need to do forensics in a way that can be admissible as court evidence, right? So the stuff you find will be like actual evidence. So the chain of custody that usually applies to like actual physical items has to apply to, in some way, to the files and stuff you find on a drive. So you have to document everything you do all the time. So let's start with just a brief discussion of some common types of file systems. So there's FAT32. These is an acronym for File Allocation Table. I think most Windows systems use, if not that, some actually they used to use that. And then there's NTFS, which is New Technology File System. Stands for that. And then EXT, which is what Linux uses, Extended File System. Just cool. Yeah, so these are the notes I took. I was planning on being able to read these, but we're not going to do that today, so all right, that's fine. So yeah, let's do this. So how FAT or FAT handles files is it scatters bits and pieces of them around, and it has algorithms to go and find those bits and pieces to put them back together when you need them. And then the full file path of each file can be as long as 255 characters. FAT32 was meant to be an improvement on that, where it uses the space better, and then maximum allocation for those systems were 4 gigabytes, and that's the reason they're not used so much anymore, because 4 gigs is not a lot of storage. NTFS was an improvement on FAT because it offered just a lot of better stuff, better file names, better file compression, better logging. And then EXT 1 through 4 were designed for Linux, with 4 being the most commonly used, which is probably what most of our Linux file systems use today. And then file formats. So we've all seen like .doc, .txt, .jpeg, PDF, TXT, ISO, whatever files, and these are different kinds of files that mean different things. Now, the most important thing to note about this with regard to forensics is that the dot extension is not always, it usually means that's that type of file. But what can happen is there are some particular bytes in the actual file that actually say what that file is, and they can be modified. So if you're a malicious actor, you can change what type a file appears to be for whatever reason. So don't always trust, in general, the dot whatever of a file to identify what kind of file it is. In general, when you're doing this kind of forensics, you would want to take further steps to actually verify what kind of files you're dealing with. So in the process of Filesystem Forensics, there are about 5 basic steps to take. There's acquisition, in which you get all the stuff you're going to be looking at and the stuff you're going to be working with. Validation and discrimination, in which you make copies of stuff and you make sure that the copies are exactly what you copied, so it's admissible. Extraction, in which you take stuff and get the data you're going to analyze. Reconstruction, put it together. Reporting is kind of done through all these steps, but at the last part, you just write a report of everything you did. Let's check our questions. We're good.
Hey Luke,
Yeah.
I use that question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Where can we access these slides?
These slides are going to be posted on the CSG on the website pretty shortly after the presentation, or I'd say within a week. Yeah. So, the acquisition step of Filesystem Forensics. So you're going to get the system that you want to look at, and it should be secured with all the files accounted for, copied. Everything should be in the state that you want it to be to find stuff. So there's 4 main methods of acquisition. So from a system, you're going to want to generate an image file or some kind of thing you can use to load into a program that can give you the means to analyze stuff. John's going to come in here and give me another monitor. Let's have a hand for John again.
So that works. Yeah, that works up here. We do.
Good one.
And we are just too blessed.
So what John said about, I'm going to keep talking. So
Yeah.
disk to image is the most common form of this, where you just have a hard disk and you run a program, usually DD or something, where you take, or actually not DD, you just, in some way, generate an image from the disk specifically. Yes, John?
You just display port? Really? Okay.
On the front. Oh, shit.
And like it's hot.
And then disk to disk, if the previous method is not possible, you would do that. Logical is a less complete way of doing it, where it only captures the files you want to see. So you don't capture everything. It's going to be a less complete way of doing that. And then sparse is going to be just fragments of scattered data. Why would disk to image not be possible? Well,
It's a great question.
it is a great question. Disk to image,
If there's
Wanna answer that?
if the disk is damaged,
yeah.
that's a big one. Corruption. Normally, when you're talking about disk to image, it's doing a block by block. Can't see all you guys. Normally, when you're talking about disk to image, you're doing a block by block copy. So we're not just doing files per se, because especially if you have a big file on a disk, your hard drive might decide that's going to put part of the file on a certain sector of your drive, and then another part of the file in a different sector. But when you're doing a block by block, you're getting each individual sector. So while a file is a file and that can be moved around, if you have a big section of sectors, that may not actually have like any, like that may not make any sense unless you have like the fat partition that's going to tell your computer where each file actually lives on those sectors. So if there's things wrong with the sectors, that can cause an issue.
Yeah.
Say you're a hacker and you have some sort of cool system that your hard drives are rigged so it can tell that it's not hooked up to your computer, and then they explode with red phosphorus gas, and you know, I've been watching too much CSI, I guess.
We've got another question here. What exactly is an image? An image, of the kind we're talking about, a disk image, is like, essentially is like a file that contains all of the different parts of the hard disk. So like everything about its files, everything about what was stored, what was deleted. It's not really a snapshot of the system. It is a compilation of everything, all the data it has. And it's stored in a particular way depending on the file system itself. So if you take a disk image from a disk, you're essentially capturing almost kind of the essence of that disk into a file that you can do things with. Step, I believe, 2, validation and discrimination. So this is where you take the disk image and you essentially create the image, and then you take a copy of the disk image, because the step you're doing to go from disk to disk image and then disk image to forensic image, that first step has more assurance than the second one because you're coming straight from the actual system. The second step is where you want to take a hash of the original image and the copied image and compare those to make sure they're the same. A hash being like a signature that gives you assurance that this one file is the exact same as the other file. Essentially, you're making a copy that has assurance. Is there any possibility a disk might have some protection that prevents it from being copied? And if so, what would you do to work around that? John, you want to take that?
No, dude, I didn't hear it.
If a disk has some protection that prevents it from being copied, what would you do to work around that? I'm not sure of any protections that disks might have for that, honestly.
You mean like encryption?
encrypted disks?
Yeah.
That's possible. Yeah,
Those exist. I've heard of them, yeah.
that's true. Honestly, I'm not sure.
So normally when you have full disk encryption, if it's done correctly, your motherboard's going to have a hardware security module in place. I think there's a more correct term for what it is. But
TPM?
Is that what it is?
Trusted something module.
Yeah, let's go with that. So what those things do is it's a little die on your motherboard and it has a basis of encryption on it. So what happens is when you tell your OS, hey, encrypt my disk, then it's going to ask your TPM for the actual base of entropy to actually encrypt it, and then it goes and encrypts the drive. The benefit of this is that if someone snags your hard drive, it basically works like asymmetric encryption. Well, cool, they got all that data, but they don't have your key now, so what good is it? It's all encrypted. If you had your actual encryption key on your hard drive, someone could go find it and go, oh, sweet, now I have the decryption key, encryption key, and the data. Like, this is easy. So if someone snags the hard drive, then that'd be tough.
Encryption.
That's above my pay grade about how you would actually fix that. I mean, there's also like physical. There's physical vulnerable. There's physical protections, or I would say like ways of circumventing.
If you melt the disk, it's hard to copy it.
Again, like
pretty difficult.
I don't know how true this is, but I've heard people saying that like the screws on a physical like optical disk drives, the big spinny ones, the screws on them are torqued to a specific specification, and that's to maintain a certain pressure inside the drive. If someone were to go and like unscrew those, and then you pop that sucker in, if it doesn't maintain the same pressure, I don't know how, and maybe this is just 100% Hollywood legend and I'm just spouting this out my butt, but like it could make the disk unreadable if the pressure is incorrect. So I've heard of people, and again, I don't know if this is true or not, where they've had like effectively like a torquing wrench set to the right torque. They detorque their hard drive when they're shutting down the machine, and then before they boot it up, they torque it back. That way, if someone doesn't realize that they need to torque it, they're going to spin that sucker up, and boom, it's ruined. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably. Thank you, John. Next step in the process would be after you've validated that the copy you made that you're going to work on is the same as the copy that you made of the disk, you're going to extract files, right? You're going to extract stuff that you want to get as evidence. So the important point to consider here is that deleting a file, as you've probably been told many times, does not get rid of it forever. So just deleting something, even emptying the recycle bin, doesn't delete it forever, okay? So to that point, extracting data from unallocated space is called file carving, where you just go and essentially carve out stuff you want to find. So deleting a file, what it does is it removes it from the disk contents table. In FAT, in FAT, it's called the file allocation table, and in NTFS, it's called the master file table. So typically, data is stored in clusters on the hard disk, and deleting those clusters makes them difficult to reconstruct, but not impossible. The actual way to delete a file that's usually not very accessible to just the user is to overwrite the space in memory where the actual file was stored. Because remember, files are stored like in bits and pieces all around the memory space. So to actually delete something, instead of just deleting like the header of it or the pointer to it, is to actually overwrite every place where it was stored, which is, again, kind of hard to do, and it's kind of hard to get it from all those places, but again, it's not impossible. That's what this process is meant to do. It's meant to go and find those things if they weren't overwritten and reconstruct files. So a file should have essentially a header and footer somewhere in the memory. What you deleted was kind of like a thing that said, go look for this file in here. And then that space was marked for deletion, meaning that it's open to anyone, but the actual stuff is still there. So it's possible, depending on the algorithm that the disk uses, to put stuff in places that your stuff is still there. And if you have the header and the footer, you can extract stuff between those 2 points and analyze it. Is reconstructing files possible on an SSD? Probably. That's a Google right there, folks. I mean, it is a drive. I want to say that it's not less susceptible to forensic analysis than other drives. And is there a way to reconstruct files even if they were overwritten on a magnetic disk? Yes. Yes, there are. There is.
There's a way to do it, and it's very analog, but say you have a file and it's got some pretty incriminating evidence on it, and then you decide, okay, but I'm a smart hacker. I'm not just going to go and drop this in my recycling bin. I'm going to empty my recycling bin, and then I'm going to overwrite that sector with a bunch of zeros. Well, if you did that on a magnetic disk, there are ways of recovering it, and it's because when you have a bit on a magnetic disk and it reads as a 1, and then you went over it with just a single 0, it'll read as a 0. Maybe it's better to do this on a whiteboard. But it's like, it won't be a perfect 0. It'll be kind of a little bit higher than all the other zeros. So someone who's doing magnetic disk recovery can look at that and go, oh, well, this might have been a 1. This might have been a 1 at some point. And then they can look at all the zeros and see the ones that are slightly more 1 looking than a 0. And we're talking about analog, so it's like how,
It's a very janky way, or what?
Yeah, does that make any sense, or am I just like, yeah, what's up, bud?
What if you just like put a bunch of just random garbage into the random garbage, put in more random garbage, delete it?
That is exactly how you circumvent that, yes.
I mean, I think some processes, especially like C cleaner, when you initiate like an empty space line, it sets all the bits to 1 and back to 0 to mess to just completely mix it.
Exactly, and if you do something with like dban, was it Darren's boot and nuke? Yeah, dban does stuff where you can it's a special tool. Dban is a special tool that lets you go and just wipe drives, but it's really good at it because it has a lot of different functions you can do, like setting all the bits to 1 on an entire drive, then back to 0, and doing that a numerous amount of times, or by just setting everything to random bits 1,000,000 times, however many times you want. And what that does is it makes it so if you're trying to recover it on a magnetic disk, it just, you got nothing.
We have an interesting question now, John.
Oh, shit. Okay. Do we?
Is there a way to retrieve data from random access memory after power off?
It's a great question. I don't know anything.
I mean, my intuition tells me probably, because data isn't really ever deleted, but RAM is random access and it's not meant to store data.
Are we talking about, non-volatile RAM? Or
Not non-volatile or volatile RAM?
Can,
I don't know.
Can we answer with a philosophical question or
what is RAM?
What is
That's my answer. That is another Google. Our knowledge only goes so far, but thank you for asking. We will look into it.
We're gonna forget all this.
We'll try and
we're
look.
done.
I'm trying to establish rapport, John. I want him to believe us.
Good luck.
Okay. Reconstruction. This is the part where it's pretty much the hardest part, where you take what you got from the extraction step and you put it back together with specific tools based on reconstruction algorithms. That is then further analyzed. So you would take all the bits and pieces you got from all those random spots in memory, and you would try and sew them back together with a bunch of algorithms that look at where you got them from and decide what to do with the bits and pieces. This has various levels of success depending on how the data was treated and how you extracted it, and it's a very complex process that I don't think any of us have actually ever mastered, but it's out there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, reporting. So, like I said in the beginning, reporting should really be done at every single step because, again, if you want to do this in a legal environment, you're going to need to have evidence that you didn't falsify or fabricate or lose anything, because if you're going to find a document that incriminates a person and sends them to jail for 20 years, people want to know that it was actually there on the drive when it was, or before you started your investigation. You didn't piece it together from stuff you pulled from somewhere else, and you didn't make any mistakes. So reporting is very important in this process.
If you're doing forensic analysis and you're taking this because you're trying to prove something, imagine you are using yourself and your technology against a defense attorney who knows nothing about technology but knows how to just spew as much crap as possible to try and save his client. So yeah, as much auditing, as much logging, as much reporting, you write it all down in a way that is very provable, because you are going up against a dummy who is just saying anything he can to keep his client happy.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have irrefutable proof.
We have a question now. Would you ever have to make your own reconstruction algorithm for some specific case? I mean, the algorithms that are out there were made for specific cases, or people looked at how data was stored and
Are you asking me personally? Because if so, no, I'm changing career fields if someone ever asked me to do that.
Fair. It's fair, John. But I mean, I guess in the broad sense, no, because I imagine there are already established tools and procedures for this. But if you're doing forensic analysis on a system that isn't very common and you know a lot about what you're looking for, then yeah, I would say that's a very possible thing you could do, is make an algorithm that does exactly what you want because you know you want it to do. Okay, so there are a couple tools out there that I'm going to show to you now. I'm going to talk about two, show you one. The first one is called Autopsy. Autopsy is called Autopsy Forensic Browser. It is available in Kali Linux, all of the free distributions. It's a free and open source digital forensics platform. It can view data from most of the popular file systems, including the ones we talked about earlier. It has two modes. There are data analysis and live analysis, which essentially corresponds to just the two states, or the two states a system can be in, which is, it can be either running or not running, essentially. So in dead analysis is the most common type of analysis, in which you have a system that is turned off and you just create the image and take it off and then work with it and go through the process that I outlined. In live analysis, it's actually analyzed while running, and Autopsy is run on a CD on the system, and that's less trusted than dead analysis because the system has more opportunities to change things than with dead analysis. Obviously, it can't change the contents of any places in memory if it's not running any processes. So live analysis is usually used during incident response, which is usually followed by dead analysis. So if something is happening, then you would use live analysis, and then afterwards you would stop that, shut down the system, take an image, and then do the dead analysis, which is the process, again, that I outlined earlier. The other tool that I don't have a lot of slides about right now is called ProDiscover. It is for Windows, and it essentially does a lot of the same things that Autopsy does, which is why I don't have a lot of slides for it. So that's Autopsy and ProDiscover, and I actually am now going to be able to show you a little bit of Autopsy. So yeah, I'm not sure if the questions are going to stay up, but okay. So this is Kali Linux, and this tool is available on Kali, essentially. So, oh my God, I'm tight. Just typing Autopsy is going to give me this link here. And what we're going to do, what? Okay. I have here an image that I took of something online. It has some stuff. It has some files that were put into the recycle bin and deleted, right? We'll not say if they were my nudes or not. That's going to be up for debate. So I just want to essentially look at this in a way that I couldn't without a tool of this kind. So this gives me this link here, and all I have to do to start Autopsy is go into a browser and then load that link. I already have it loaded, so here it is. This is the forensic browser. In this case, browser actually means it opens in a browser. It uses the web, kind of. Well, it's local, but anyway. So if I want to use that image in a new case, I do new case, and then for the case name, I'm just going to do CSG demo. Only letters, numbers, and symbols. Description. All these things are part of the reporting step, right? So everything has to be well documented, and Autopsy knows that. So it's going to ask you to write a lot of stuff about everything.
We have a question. What is the .dd extension?
The .dd extension. I believe that's something that just comes from the tool DD, or am I wrong?
But what is the tool DD?
The tool DD is a program that takes a disk ISO or some kind of image, or it takes an ISO.
Block level files or block level storage.
Yeah. Block level files or block level storage, and it converts it into a disk image. So when it does this, it sometimes gives them a name of .dd, which is the tool that's used. I'm not sure what DD stands for, but I know what it does.
Data duplicate.
Data duplicate. Yep. Data duplicate is a tool on Linux that I use to generate that.
We don't have, if we're doing a DD copy, we don't have to really specify any extension. It's just polite to do a .dd to let people know it's an export from the data duplicate. Data duplicate doesn't have to, fun fact, data duplicate doesn't have to have doesn't have to just output to a file. It can also output to a storage drive or a storage device. So if you wanted to, if you had one hard drive and you want to move everything over to your other drive, but you don't want to just copy the files over, you want to get the food sector, you want to get all that goodness, then you can use the data duplicate to do a block level copy. So it looks at first sector on one drive and you can put it to another one. But that's why it's good for doing stuff like Autopsy, where we're basically creating a file out of what used to be an entire hard drive. And that file holds all the sector data that was in the previous drive.
Yeah. So for the description, I have some that I've done here from previous cases. We're just going to call it a CSG demo, and then I am Chrome Discord, so that's me. And then we'll hit a new case. So the case directory is here, the config file for this case is here, and then it needs a host to essentially be able to run the tools that it runs. So most of the stuff is optional. I'm going to ignore it for now because we don't have all the stuff we would have if we were actually doing a forensic analysis on this, but this is essentially, you can read a description here, the time zone, time skew adjustment. All this it would be important if we had to, again, be as exact as we would want to be if we were actually extracting stuff to use in, court. And then hash databases. This is important because hashes give you assurance that files are that this file is the exact same as this file. So if we have hash databases that we know that we're looking for a particular file, we could put it into one of these, and then we'd be able to tell it to alert us essentially if it finds a file through our reconstruction that was one of those ones. For now, I'm just going to add host, and then now is the part where we import the image that we got earlier. So image file is going to ask me for the full path. I think it should just be, yep. This is where it is. That's the absolute, I think it's the absolute path of this file. which again is the image that I generated earlier. And that process, I wasn't going to show it to you because it can take a long time, depending, of course, on how big the image is. I did it earlier with a tiny core, which is a small distribution of Linux, which took a very short amount of time, but with an actual system, it could take, I don't know, up to an hour, hours, a long time. So it wasn't, what?
7 hours.
Yeah, some long amount of time. So once you get an image, you do this. This image file is for a disk, and the import method symlink just kind of uses a symbolic link. You can copy it or you can actually move it. I don't think you would want to move it a lot, because if you move it, you are essentially during the copy, like moving the actual image, and if you do that and it fails, it could damage the original image, which you don't want, because that's what you were trying to analyze, and now your entire analysis is kaput. And it actually tells you that up there, if a system failure occurs during the move, the image could become corrupt. So I'd say generally don't do this. This is fine. And then if you want to ignore or calculate the hash, I'm going to calculate it for this one just to show you. And the mount point is going to be C. It already analyzed the image and detected that it was this type, and it has these sectors, whatever sectors are. It identified the file system type, and it showed us the mount point. So just add this. It takes the image and calculates the hash, the MD5 hash. MD5 is a hash algorithm, essentially. And then this is the MD file, so we would take this and put it somewhere so that we know what the hash is for the copy we made. And then we hit OK. And now we have this case here. So it gave us these two things to look at, the disk and the C drive. C drive is where most of the actual stuff is. So we hit Analyze. This is all the tools that Autopsy gives us. So in the file analysis, this is where you can essentially troll through all the files in the system in much the same way that the Explorer would do, or the default program for going through files on Windows or Mac or Linux or whatever. But obviously it's a little more powerful. For instance, if I hit all deleted files, this can actually show me what it found for any of the files that were deleted or marked for deletion. In the keyword search here, you can look for stuff that you want to find if you know what you're looking for, and it'll go and look for it in all of the data. The main idea of this whole thing is that, or of the whole tool, is that it has more power than just looking through files in an active system, because it has access to all the memory that you at the user level would not have. And then in file type sorting, this essentially is just a cool little tool that enables you to sort files by type. It's pretty straightforward. It can be a time-intensive process because drives can be big, and there can be a lot of files, and the best sorting algorithms still take quite a long time if there's millions of files, which is most likely what's going to happen if you are doing this on an actual system with a lot of files. Like, that's going to happen. This is just general stuff about the actual file system. Again, it identified the type, has a serial number, has all of this metadata, sectors and clusters and good stuff. And this is metadata mode. This tells you stuff about any MFT entry. I'm not quite sure what that is, but oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I said it earlier.
Yeah,
yes.
you said that earlier.
Master file table entry. So basically, this is where you can go to find info about any specific file in the master file table. It'll tell you other stuff about that file. So you can put, once you find a file from any of these other ones, you can go and find its entry number and put it in here. It'll like bring it up for you and then tell you everything about that file that it knows. And then the data unit, this can tell you about the contents of the clusters. And then there's help and then there's close. So that was pretty much all I wanted to show you about that.
We're good on time.
Yeah, we are good on time.
I can give you guys a little story.
Yeah, sure.
Nearly on time. By the way, there's some pizza, so if anyone wants to get a little bit more, you can.
Yeah, please come get some more pizza.
We don't like taking it home. It gets gross.
We really don't.
It. So, about a year ago, in the company that I was working for, it was my previous manager. I have to be careful about what I say here because I think there's actually still an ongoing investigation. That's the start of any good story. But there were some allegations that he took the source code of some software, custom software that my company had produced, and sold it directly to our competitor.
It's a pretty heavy allegation.
Pretty heavy allegation, especially when, at the level of revenue that these types of software were creating, it was a very serious ordeal. So the CTO told me to take his laptop and I'd go take it to some file forensics guys. And I think paid them about $5,000 to do forensic analysis on his hard drive. It was a perfectly working computer. It was just the whole ordeal was we needed to have a forensic analysis, someone who's certified to do forensics analysis, investigate the machine for legal reasons. So the guy looks on the machine and he pops it into, it could have just been Autopsy. It could have been a free software like you just saw. And he looks on the desktop of the laptop and there's all the source code in a zip file, and he checks Outlook, and there's a copy of the email he sent directly to our competitor with the source code attached to it. The guy had used his work email to send it to him. So then I was able to go to our Exchange server and do an entire litigation, a whole e-discovery case, and pull up, oh yeah, he's been corresponding with these guys for months.
So you were dealing with a master hacker here.
Yes. It was nearly bulletproof, y'all. All that to say, someone got paid $5,000 to do what you just saw Crow do here. Just to pop in a drive and go, oh yeah, there's the file. Here you go. And as far as that goes, the difference between why Crow didn't just get paid $5,000 to do this and that guy was, because that guy was certified to do it. Mm-hmm. And he holds legal weight. So it's an interesting field. I think it's really fun. Yeah, you got a question?
Yeah, is there actual paper certification to do file forensics, like A+ or something like that?
That's a great question. Google it. We'll get back to you on that.
We are here to deliver the results of our Googles to you in a very nice format. But we encourage you to do your own Googling because that's what the entirety of CS education is about. Honestly, come on.
Yeah, pretty much. One more question? It's 5 over?
5 of the 5 certifications.
Oh, there are 5 of them. Awesome.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, there you go. So if anyone wants to go ahead and do that, you can make big money if you don't mind dealing with courts and legal process.
I like how in that story he did the forensic analysis, but it sounds like if you just opened the laptop and we were able to log in.
Oh yeah, no,
he's right there.
I'm knowing the guy, he probably didn't have a password on it. He could have just logged right in. But again, it's the fact that he had to do so in such a way that would make an airtight case when it came to legal ramifications.
Moral of the story is, if you're a forensics guy, document everything so you have an airtight case. If you're selling the source code that your company wrote to your competitor, don't leave it on your desktop, and don't leave the email. Just don't be stupid.
If you're gonna do illegal shit, don't use your work email. Don't use your work computer. Like, yeah, exactly. No, don't use work Wi-Fi. God damn.
Anyway, here are some links to some of the stuff I talked about, namely where I got the image and some tutorials for Autopsy itself. That concludes our presentation for tonight. Thank you for coming. I think you've all cleaned out the pizza. We'll see you next week. Turn me, Dad. You can't ever turn me. I'm so turned off by that.
Hey, quick question.
What's up?
I wasn't here for like the intro to the introductory session for the club.
Yeah?
Is there anything I do for that, or I just go on the mail list?
Did you sign in?
Yeah, I did that.
No, that's fine. That's it.
I didn't know how far the process.
We just want signed in, that's all.
I guess it's a computer science group, so I guess.
Are you an artist?
There's no membership or anything, just sign in. Thank you, sir.
In our general, there's a payment message. It's pretty old, but it has a lot of, I think the username
Hello?
Kulinax.
Are you guys current students here?
It has a lot of good resources.
Yes, we are, sir.
What, where'd you guys learn your stuff? Did you guys just learn your stuff just on the side while you get a degree, or where'd you guys?
A few of us have experience. Like he's worked for some company he works elsewhere. I know another one of us has worked for some government agencies, but by and large, we mostly just do the stuff on the side. Yeah.
What's you guys' degree plan?
We're all CS, I think. A lot of us are doing a master's in actually, of the officers, just 2 of us are doing a master's in information assurance. Me and the other guy, Brandon, is not here tonight. John is currently working somewhere.
And let's not talk about where I work. I just gave a
Okay. And he's
disclosive information. I don't want
he's almost a student too.
but there's a lot of
yeah.
resources on campus, and again, like
Appreciate the
we're
knowledge.
doing some CTS.
Thank you.